Cornhusker Corner.
Speaking of dark horses,
Yes.
let's go with this one. This is something that we kind of came up with, as we're ramping up to the season here. The name of the game is, literally picking a dark horse from each Power 5 conference. Not even to say that they're going. Are we going to say that they're going to win? Or just
it's a dark horse pick to win. Like, who
Dark
could
horse pick
win?
to win.
You're not locking it in. We're not putting money on this.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I just didn't know if we were going to go, because there's always, like Kansas last year, there's always surprises to teams that are way more competitive than they were the year before. So,
Yes.
okay. So, dark horse to win.
Let's
All
go
right.
by conference, and we'll start with
All right.
the most boring to me, probably. The
Pac-12?
ACC. The ACC. No, the Pac-12, it just has bad media deals. Their actual conference, they have pretty good teams. You look at the top 5 quarterbacks
True.
in the Pac-12,
Oregon.
it's actually pretty insane.
True.
Bo
Okay.
Nix, Cam
Yeah.
Rising. Matter of fact, let's do Pac-12. We'll do ACC later. We're already talking about it. Bo
All right.
Nix, Cam Rising, Michael Penix Jr., Caleb Williams, DJ Uyunglele. I mean, I could go Shador Sanders if he's all the hype that people are talking about. So, you look at their teams. The Pac-12 is actually on the field. Is actually going to be a really interesting conference this year. That's the irony of the whole situation.
True.
Yeah, and there's favorites. Utah would be considered a favorite. USC is definitely the favorite. Washington
then always Oregon.
Washington and Oregon are up there, and they'll always be in the mix. So besides those 4 teams,
Yeah.
because none of those would be considered a dark horse,
No.
who would you pick? For me, I can go
UC
first if you'd like. Go ahead.
UCLA.
Go ahead.
UCLA. Because unlike the Scott Frost era, and I say that because Chip Kelly is, Scott Frost was one of his guys. But unlike that, it kind of seems like they're starting to click. And he's kind of adapted as a coach. He's had a couple of classes now to get recruiting there. They're starting to be, look at last year. They were competitive, and they were, did they go 7-0 before losing a game? They went really far into the season
Yeah, they
before
did.
losing.
Their quarterback's good.
Yeah,
Was good. Is he still there?
I believe so, yeah. So they have a good amount of returning talent, and I just think that in general, they're going to take another step forward. There you go. I think they're going to take another.
Skills out.
Yeah, I think they're going to take another step forward. And I still think Chip Kelly's a good coach. He had to adapt his system and what he was coaching because everybody figured it out and everybody else started to use what he was coaching and came up with. So I think that once he's found that kind of a good hybrid of what he used to do with some new stuff, and I just think they're going to take a step forward, especially in that conference. It's all up in the air. And I think they're going to really carry that momentum into here.
Dante Moore, that's going to be their starting quarterback. Dante Moore, he's a freshman actually, but he was like their 5-star headline. UCLA pays quarterback $6 million. He's that guy.
Yeah.
So they went 9-4 last year. This is Chip Kelly's 6th year at UCLA. Wow, it does not seem like it's been 6 years.
He got hired the same year Frost did.
Let's look at schedule. Schedule's everything. So you got Coastal Carolina, San Diego State, NC Central. That's their out of conference. That's a good out of conference.
Yep.
Then they play at Utah as their first conference game.
Yeah.
At Utah. Then they have Washington State at home. Then they go at Oregon State. Spoiler. Give me a second. Then they go at Stanford. They have Colorado at home, at Arizona, Arizona State at home, at USC, and then Cal at home. So Utah and at USC. Those are the tough games for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so UCLA, interesting pick. That is a fringe dark horse because they're probably like the 5th best team. They'd probably be picked like 5th right now in the Pac-12. But I'll give it to you. That is
but still,
total dark
if you say UCLA, I'm gonna pick UCLA. That's a prediction. So
yes. Okay, so let me find my team that I'm predicting, which is the Oregon State Beavers. I'm predicting the Oregon State, not predicting, but my dark horse for the Pac-12 to possibly win the conference is the Oregon State Beavers. Their head coach,
Riley
is Scott Barnes. Their head coach
Yeah.
is Scott Barnes. Or sorry, their head coach is Jonathan Smith. Sorry, I'm on Wikipedia. His name was right about Jonathan Smith. They were really good last year. They had a 10-win season last year, and their biggest problem was like they had average quarterback play. So now they have DJ Uiagalelei, who was in a system at Clemson that has come under a lot of fire as far as offensively because, I mean, look, Clemson hired a new offensive coordinator. They needed to. I mean, they're an elite team. When elite teams go out and hire new coordinators, it's because there's a problem that they need to fix.
Yep.
So they hired a new coordinator. So that's an indicator to me that as much he wasn't the only problem with that system.
No.
So I think at its core, DJ Uiagalelei is still a talented quarterback. I think he's on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Uiagalelei doesn't sound like an Alabama or a Clemson quarterback. It sounds like an Oregon, USC, one of those types of quarterback. So I'm just very interested. They have a guy who's a former 5-star starting quarterback, and everyone's forgetting they were a 10-win team last year.
Yeah.
But they're not picked higher than like 7 or 6. So
yeah,
they're an interesting team to watch.
I did think about them too. But
they play Utah at home. They get Washington at home. Their hardest road games are at Colorado and at Oregon. Out of conference, UC Davis, San Diego State, San Jose State. So like we're not talking about the craziest schedule in the world if they're a good team. But yeah, so Pac-12. You picked UCLA. I picked Oregon State. So I guess we could go all the way across the country to the ACC next.
ACC, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll do ACC.
That conversation is not going to be as
robust.
I
have to level with everybody who watches. The ACC is my least favorite conference. It is everyone talks about how bad the Pac-12 is, but it's just because it's late. Like the games come on very late. Yeah. They're not bad. Like I promised, the games are actually relatively entertaining. The ACC, on the other hand, is like 3 or 4 teams, and then the rest of the conference.
Yeah.
So let me stipulate: the only team that I'm not calling a dark horse for the ACC is Clemson, because everyone else in that conference really is sort of a dark horse.
Yeah.
You could maybe argue Florida State, but they're really just now back on the come up. So
yeah.
So you could go ahead and go first if you like.
Shit. I mean, speaking of
do you want
Florida State.
Okay, there you go. Perfect.
Because I mean, they've started to get competitive again. But I don't think anybody is looking at them and saying, you know what, they're really competitors this year. They are going to really win a lot of games and going to push Clemson to get the championship. I don't think anybody is looking at them that way. I just think they're looking at them as being competitive generally, and having the sequential building blocks to take their game a step up. So I think that they're going to not necessarily surprise people, but they're going to keep going on the trajectory that they've been going on.
So Florida State, let me give you a little breakdown on Florida State. So Mike Norvell is in his second year at head coach at Florida State. Their starting quarterback is Jordan Travis. He's really good. He's a good quarterback. He's mobile enough to get the job done. He's not necessarily a running quarterback, but he can run. And he's really got a very quick release. The other guy is Jared Verse. Jared Verse, if you remember, actually was the number 1 rush edge in the transfer portal class, where O'Shawn was number 2. So Jared Verse came in last year for Florida State and really lit the world on fire, and so he's back. And then they got Trey Benson, who's their running back. Yeah, they're set. They have 8 returning starters on offense, 9 returning starters on defense, and they went 10-3 last year. And so it's a good pick. And let's look at their schedule. So first game of the year, neutral site, LSU. That's going to be the hardest one. I mean, and I'll be glued to that game. That's going to be must see TV. And they go at Clemson. That's a tough road game. And they go at Florida. the last game of the year.
Ooh.
That's the classic Florida State game.
Yeah.
So that's their away games, their hardest away games. And then they got Miami at home. They got Duke. That's a decent team these days at home. And they got Syracuse, which is also a decent team these days at home. Virginia Tech at home as well. So for Florida State, that's a decent schedule. I think they could really get it done. So your pick being Florida State. So my pick is Miami because Miami is just the type of school that they're a little bit like LSU to me, except they haven't proven the back end of that. But my point being, I feel like Miami is really the type of team that could probably go 5-7, and then the next year everything aligns right. They find all kinds of talent, and then they're a national championship contender. Now that hasn't happened in a long time, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. We are Nebraska fans. That is our thesis statement. Just because it has not happened in a long time doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just think Miami is a program that's poised. They have 9 starters returning on offense and 10 starters returning on defense. And you got Mario Cristobal in his second year down there. Cristobal, I believe, was a Saban disciple. Wasn't Cristobal a Saban disciple? I believe he was.
Sounds right.
Yeah, but if he's not, I apologize. Starting quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. He's been spotty, but he has a lot of skill set. That's all I see that's notable that I would be able to talk about player wise. But let's look at schedules. So they get A&M at home the second game of the year. First game of the year is Miami of Ohio. They get A&M at home the second game of the year. They get. Let's see. Wow, that is a very easy schedule. Holy moly. Okay, so they play at Florida State. That's their hardest game, is at Florida State. So they got Miami of Ohio, Texas A&M, Bethune-Cookman at Temple, Georgia Tech at home, North Carolina, Clemson, Virginia, NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Boston College.
Oh, wow.
Like that to me right there. They went 5-7 last year. Okay, I know they went 5-7 last year. But because of what I just explained about their program, and then you hear that schedule, they got headroom to get a lot of momentum leading up to that Florida State game. So they are a good pick for dark horse of the ACC. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to
Big 12.
Big 12. Okay, cool.
Big 12. Let's go. I haven't been following a lot about the Big 12 except for because I think just in general the consensus is like the new teams there, so they're getting a lot of press coverage. And I don't even know if this would be considered a dark horse or not, because they were in the championship game last year, but they had a lot of attrition. And I'm going to go with Kansas State.
Okay.
Because Kansas State did lose a lot of really good players. Most of the game breaker, Deuce, he's gone.
Yes.
And he single-handedly carried that team sometimes last year, especially after Adrian went down.
Yeah.
He made plays when they needed to. He kept them in competing with Alabama for a long time in that game before it got broken open. So I think that Kleiman is a great coach, not a good coach. He's a great coach.
Agreed.
And he's what in his is it 4th year now?
I'm not 100% sure about that. That's the wrong question to ask me.
Well, okay.
With the guy with Phil Stills right in front of him.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you.
Do you know what this magazine looks like? It's insane.
Yes.
I need reading glasses to read it.
Yeah. So I believe it sounds right that he's in his 4th year. It might be 3rd, but
either way.
Either way. He's a great coach, and I think he set up a culture for success there. What does their schedule look like? Because I'm just literally I don't have that little encyclopedia.
He got hired in 2019. Sorry, he got hired in 2019. So this is his 4th year.
4th year, yeah.
Fourth year.
I was right.
Yeah.
I was right. So what does their schedule look like?
So let me give you a little breakdown. So they went 10-4 last year. They have 8 returning starters on offense and only 5 returning starters on defense. So that's the big question mark for Kansas State is their defense. And they got Will Howard returning at quarterback, and he was a big bright spot for them last year when Adrian went down. Absolutely. And this is, again, no offense to Adrian. We like Adrian Martinez on this program, okay? Yeah. But Adrian went down, and we were all excited because he had just beat Oklahoma and all this stuff, and he was having his year. But he went down, and after about 2 or 3 quarters of play, nobody really asked where Adrian was for the rest of the year, pretty much. And again, that's not against Adrian, but Will Howard played really good. Like they didn't lose anything. If anything, they maybe gained something because Will Howard is a good passer. But yeah, so 8 returning starters on offense, 5 on defense. Let's look at their schedule. So Southeast Missouri, I believe that is SEMO. That's what it says in all caps. SEMO. Southeast Missouri, I believe. First game of the year at home. Then Troy at Missouri. So that's an out of conference game. Remember, it's hard to remember things like that. At Missouri. Then they play UCF at home. And then they go at Oklahoma State, at Texas Tech, TCU at home, Houston at home, which is their homecoming game, at Texas, Baylor at home, at Kansas, Iowa State at home. So they go at Texas, at Oklahoma State, at Texas Tech, at Kansas, at Missouri. Those are all their away games.
Wow, that's a
tough
rough
schedule.
That's a tough schedule.
That's a very tough schedule. Yeah, but that's a good pick. I mean, I could see them being good again. It's the Kleiman factor for me when you look at when you're talking about K-State.
Yeah.
I just have a lot of respect for Chris Kleiman. If the announcement had came the day before the Iowa game last year that Nebraska had hired Chris Kleiman, I would not have been mad. I would have been very happy.
Yeah.
I think we both probably were on the same page of that. We would have been very happy about
that. Was one of the names we were throwing out.
It was,
it was.
He was part of the conversation for a long time. Yeah. So my pick, and I'm going with another team that's sort of like the coach factor again. It's the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Because of Joey McGuire. I just think if we're gonna be rule guys, like you got to give his disciples some credit too, because that's who Joey McGuire is. Joey McGuire is a guy who was a high school coach who Rule gave an opportunity to when he was at Baylor. I believe that McGuire served as Rule's tight ends coach. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so he got hired at Texas Tech, and I believe this is his second year. Yes, this is his second year at Texas Tech. And they went 8-5 last year, and they were a fighting team. I watched a couple of different Texas Tech games, and it seemed like the game was never over with Texas Tech. They were always fighting till the very end. So offense, here's the big factor for me when I'm looking at a dark horse for who's going to win. Offense, they have, get this, 11 returning starters on offense. 11, all of them are returning on offense. And on defense, they only have 6 returning starters. But that is a big factor.
That quarterback's one of them, right?
The big, tall, black guy?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't even their quarterback. No. You watched the U of H game, huh?
I did.
Yeah, that's the one you're thinking of. He's U of H's quarterback this year. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
So he went out and beat Dana Holgerson, and Dana's like, I'm going to go get him.
Pretty much. No, they had another guy, Tyler Show Jr., or Tyler Show. I thought that was his name. It's saying he's a senior. Like he's already got a kid.
Tyler Show.
Yeah. No. Okay. So 11 offensive returning starters. Let's go over their schedule real quick. So here's their out of conference at Wyoming, which is never easy. Okay, never easy. That's a good program. And they bring Oregon to Lubbock, and then they play Tarleton State. So Oregon is their big out of conference game. That'll be a good game. I'll watch that game. Okay, then in conference. So here's their away games. They go at West Virginia, at Baylor, at BYU, at Kansas, and at Texas. Those are their away games. Texas the last week of the year. Home games. They got Houston, Kansas State, TCU, and UCF.
So Houston has to play at Texas Tech twice, 2 years in a row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And one of them, they weren't even a part of the conference yet. Yeah, that's crazy. Which is crazy because, like, if there was rumblings of that type of thing, the general practice has been to cancel your home and homes. Like Ohio State did that with Oregon. They had a home and home scheduled with Oregon, and they were supposed to have played this year, but they canceled it. And so that's one of the big smoke things as far as Oregon going to the Big Ten. But anyway, so yeah, they're to me they're a very good pick for breakout team, dark horse, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's Big 12. We've done those three. Now the Big Two. Let's start with the SEC.
Yep.
So the SEC. Let me get to my SEC section. That's the Big Ten
SEC.
section. Okay,
Yeah,
SEC
this is
section.
the one I'm having a lot of trouble with, honestly. One, just because they have so many good teams.
They do, yeah.
And it just depends. Like some years they have an up or
I'll
down.
go first if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to bring this team up just because I want to talk about them. But they are a dark horse pick, okay? Texas A&M. Okay?
Oh,
Texas A&M. Texas A&M.
What?
Here's why I want to talk about it because of your reaction. That's exactly why I want to talk about them. No,
right.
Texas A&M is an interesting pick for dark horse because we're talking about a team that, yes, there was some attrition in that class, but 2 years ago they signed the most talented class in the history of college football. And it's not like they've been chumps at recruiting every other year. So, like, they're a loaded team. And now here's the big kicker. The big kicker is Jimbo is supposedly this offensive guru, but he's in his 6th year there. So he's supposedly an offensive guru, but by all accounts, he still teaches quarterbacks like things that they were teaching 20 years ago. So like release point, like 20 years ago, they wanted you to have a real high release point. These days, most quarterback coaches, as long as your release isn't too bad, will just tell you, we're not going to touch that. If you throw the ball fine, you throw the ball fine. We're going to keep you comfortable because you have people like Patrick Mahomes who he can throw from all angles, right? I mean, like they don't want to limit people. So, and if you look at A&M's quarterbacks, they all have this like awkward sort of baseball style, like high release point. And so he's brought in the offensive guru of all offensive gurus, one of the greatest people in the history of college football. And I mean people. Bobby Petrino. so yeah. He hired an offensive coordinator, Bobby Petrino. If you know anything about Bobby Petrino has the rap sheet of all rap sheets when it comes to being an immoral jackass in positions of leadership, basically. Yeah. Like every school he's been at has ended in some sort of, crashing a motorcycle with his mistress on it, or, like he was in the NFL and you thought Urban Meyer was bad a couple years ago in the NFL. Look back at when Bobby Petrino was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Then you'll see what was really bad. Or you can look back at when Bill Callahan was the coach of the Raiders. but anyway, so Bobby Petrino. But here's the thing about Bobby Petrino.
Okay,
he's had some of the greatest offenses in college football history. Like we're talking about the guy who, when he came back to Louisville, that was when Lamar came and when they had the Lamar success. Like he's had success everywhere he's gone, generally on the field. And so it's sort of interesting. It's actually a very big parallel for what we dealt with at Nebraska last year, because Scott Frost, offensive guru, brings in Mark Whipple. And then like the first press conference, they're already on different pages. That's sort of what's happening here, where they had SEC media days last week, and Jimbo was asked about who he was going to let run their offense, and he was like, he gave this vague answer that basically lets you think like, no, he's not letting Bobby Petrino run the offense; he's running the offense. So it's looking like it could be a dumpster fire. I'll say that. I think it's going to be a dumpster fire, but if for some reason everything aligns, they have the talent to get it done. That's my point.
All right.
Sure. That's my point.
Sure. Yes. All right. You don't even have to look at Phil Steele. I don't think that's going to be
10 returning starters on offense, 10 returning starters on defense.
Dude, Jimbo is such a fraud, though.
I'm probably there with you. I'm just saying, if he's going to prove it, it's going to be this year. And if he does prove it, 10 returning starters on offense, 10 returning starters on defense, a top 10 roster in college football. Like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I wanted to talk about them, because there's a lot of material there, but also like you sort of have to like give it a little bit of a chance, because it could happen. I don't think A&M, look, I've always talked about A&M because there's a lot of A&M fans around here. And if there's one program in Texas that I don't have a whole lot of respect for as a football program, it's A&M. Now, as a school, I think it's a great school. It's relatively conservative. I like that. But it's as a football program, their fans walk around this city. I live in Houston. Their fans walk around this city like they're the greatest college football team to ever exist, and they've never won a national title in the modern era. So I don't really like A&M, but you got to pick them. So who's your pick?
Okay. I was gonna say one team, but now I just had a thought because of divisions.
That's an important
No,
discussion.
screw it. I'm gonna go with Kentucky.
Ooh, all right.
I know that they, have to replace Levis for sure. And apart from that, I have no clue. But Stoops is a good coach, and he's put some really good teams on there. And it would not shock me in the least if they took another step up this year and really, took off.
Bro, you picked a good team. This is a really good dark horse SEC team because listen to this. They have 10 returning offensive starters, 5 returning on defense, but the one who's not returning is Will Levis, of course.
Levis, yeah.
But you know who their starting quarterback is?
No.
Devin Leary.
Really?
He was at North Carolina State.
Yeah.
Devin Leary. Like, he's been a starter of a good team for years. I mean, like, this guy's going to be good. So, dang, that's really interesting. So, Devin Leary. Oh, man. Guess who their running back is? Ray Davis. Straight up, that's his name.
No way. I thought you were about to say A.J. Allen.
No.
I don't even remember where he went, but.
No. Ray Davis is their starting running back.
Wow. That's funny.
Okay, so let's look at their schedule real quick just to see if they have a chance. So, holy crap. They pulled a Michigan. Their out of conference is Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and Akron.
So, yeah.
They pulled a Michigan. Yeah, they'll be 3-0. Okay, so then their away games in conference. At Vanderbilt, at Georgia, at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, at Louisville. Their home games, Florida, Missouri, Tennessee, and Alabama. So right off the bat, one big thing that jumps right out to me is they play both Georgia and Alabama.
True.
And if you want to throw Tennessee in that mix, feel free. They play Tennessee too.
Yeah.
And Louisville, who Jeff Brom's their new coach. And we all know, like, look, Jeff Brom, I mean, Louisville, we'll see what kind of a program they are, but Jeff Brom is an offensive genius, okay? I'm willing to say that. With the personnel he had at Purdue and the production he got out of them, like, he's a genius.
That's true. That's true.
So, really tough schedule.
But they get Alabama at home. I think the hardest game they're going to have to play is at Georgia.
The big factor, if you're going to point to one thing, if you're going to point to two factors, let's say, for why they are a dark horse, it's probably because they have 10 returning starters. Devin Leary is the only one that's not returning, but he's a really good quarterback. And Mark Stoops is now in his 11th year there as head coach. So he's got a program. It's established.
Yeah.
All right. So I picked A&M. You picked Kentucky.
All right.
Let's
go
move
with the
to Big Ten.
Big Ten. All righty. This one is actually more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
For me.
Not for you? Okay. Go ahead.
So for my dark horse pick, I don't even need Phil Stills because I'm going to select the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Bro, like, how are they not everyone's dark horse pick? That's my point. Like, what I said about A&M with them just having a good roster no matter what can be applied, not as, to be honest, not as talented, but the same logic can be applied to Nebraska because Nebraska has been recruiting just fine, if not really good, for where their position is in college football as far as their division and all that stuff.
Yeah.
New coach Matt Rule, we all know, we talk about this ad nauseum, but I don't know. I just think that Nebraska truly is the dark horse pick because if they do come through, all of a sudden you got a 6'4", 4'5" quarterback. You got a running back room that's really relatively deep. You got a defense that is returning quite a bit of starters. Look, I do want to pull up Phil Stills to get the exact numbers because let's see, Big Ten.
It's all right. After all the grief I gave you, I was gonna do the same thing. So.
That's why I wanted to go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to be my pick. Okay, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Nebraska. Okay. So we're returning 7 offensive starters, 8 defensive starters. We went 4-8 last year, but this is a new head coach. Jeff Sims is going to be the starting quarterback. Okay, here's schedule. Let's just real quick. We're not going to pick. Obviously, we'll do that later. But they got Colorado at Colorado, at Minnesota, the first games. And then away games in conference, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. You just look at our schedule, and it's like, okay, they don't play Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They get Michigan at home. Everything else in the Big Ten is very much, I mean, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think that it's sort of like a little bit tongue in cheek because it's a Nebraska podcast, but I don't know.
I think
Nebraska
you are going to go with dark
breakout.
If you are going to pick a dark horse, that's what I was saying when I was looking at it, because I was trying not to pick Nebraska.
Yeah,
but you kind of have to if you're doing this. And
there's other teams you could pick. There's other teams that could be dark horses.
Yeah, but
not Wisconsin. You couldn't pick Wisconsin because they're picked favorite.
Yeah,
couldn't pick. I mean, but you have to say this though. Are we talking about dark horse to win the conference or dark horse to win division? We're talking about to win the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I picked Nebraska, because even if Wisconsin's really good, I'm sorry, they just haven't recruited to quite the same clip. And if they get into one of those games, they're not going to win, in my opinion. So, like, my point is, if Nebraska is swinging at full swing and they're actually good, they sort of have a lot of talent on their roster. And maybe they might, run the table in one of those games.
Yeah.
So that's why I say if. But there are other teams you could pick. I mean, go ahead. I think I know who you're going to pick.
I was going to pick Nebraska.
No, now I know who you're going to pick. Who you're going to pick because I picked Nebraska.
Do we have to pick different teams?
I suppose, yeah.
We have to, because I was literally going to pick Nebraska.
A different team. I got a different team because we're talking about win the overall conference. I got a different team. Penn State, brother.
Okay, Penn State.
Yeah, Penn State is the obvious dark horse because they're not one of the big three. They're really good, but they got a lot of returning talent. James Franklin's been there for a long time, and they got their new 5-star starting quarterback in Rent-A-Car, who will probably be there for 7 years, Drew Aller. But by all accounts, he's the most talented quarterback they've had since Franklin's been there, at least. So there's a lot of hype behind Penn State for that as well.
I think Franklin is a good football coach, but he will collapse when I just think that he makes some decisions sometimes game decisions that are like, what are you doing? Like Scott Frost kicking an onside kick. He does stuff like that sometimes. Not that bad, but he does stuff.
Well, you have a little more insight. You have a little more insight to that side of it because of Doug. Is that where that's coming from? Do you get a lot of intel from him?
Yeah. Pulse of the program type stuff.
Yes.
He's not a big believer, so I'm not.
Right. I mean, like I got a Colorado buddy I call anytime there's news to get his opinion. But yeah, so Penn State would be another good pick, but